All right, welcome everyone to Critique Revolve. If you're new to our show, you can find us pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search Critique Revolve. I am Michael, and in the studio today with me is David Sabal. Hello, Dave.
Hello, everybody.
All right, so you and I, Dave, we're going to be talking about the upcoming sci-fi horror thriller film titled M3GAN from Blumhouse Productions with a running time of 1 hour and 59 minutes. M3GAN 2.0 is a 2025 American science fiction action horror film written and directed by Gerard Johnstone, based on a story by Johnstone and Akela Cooper. It's a sequel to M3GAN, which came out in 2022. The plot follows the titular android, Model 3 generative android, who is rebuilt to combat a humanoid military robot developed using M3GAN's own stolen technology. Allison Williams and Violet McGraw return to star alongside Ivana Sakhano and Jermaine Clement. I'm sure I pronounced those names incorrectly. Jason Blum and James Wan also return as producers under their respective Blumhouse Productions and Atomic Monster banners. The official synopsis: 2 years after M3GAN's original rampage, her creator Gemma is forced to resurrect the infamous android in order to take down Amelia, a military-grade weapon built by a defense contractor who reverse-engineered M3GAN's foundational tech. Okay, so, I was looking forward to this film for many reasons. I absolutely enjoyed the first one quite a bit.
Yeah.
It was fun. It had something to say about the advent of generative AI and the connected home in itself. Plus, Android and artificial intelligence stories have always been of incredible interest to me because the best of them are built around the question of what it means to be human, what it means to experience, and possibly more provocatively, what it means to experience itself, to reflect, to feel, to remember, and to act within intention or with intention. Now, in the past, the majority of these stories were primarily about humanity, about
Yes.
exploring the human condition, essentially. But as technology continues to advance and AI becomes increasingly prevalent and is a reality, in social and political contexts, these narratives are evolving into cautionary tales as well, which sci-fi has always been used for that purpose as well. Now, M3GAN 2.0 is different than the first in that it has more to say. Though it's predominantly structured as a fast-paced thriller, M3GAN 2.0 explores urgent questions about the societal and international responsibilities surrounding AI technologies, as well as the growing need for regulatory oversight. Now, when I say M3GAN 2.0 is different than the first, in that it has more to say, that's absolutely true. I stand by that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also different because it's not really a horror film this time around.
No. They definitely decided to go a different route with the tone of the movie. And I think that it was the right decision to do, because nowadays a lot of people feel that if you do a sequel, you need to just rinse and repeat what you succeeded in the first one,
Right.
and do it again. But I honestly think after seeing M3GAN 2.0, I actually feel that sequels need to return to kind of like an old school way of thinking, where it's like you do a film one way, and then with the next film, you keep the bones of what your franchise you're trying to build, but you take it in a different direction. You go a different tone. Say
A
example,
la the Alien franchise.
Aliens, Terminator. Because if you look at those two as like an example of that type of filmmaking, Alien started off as very isolationist. It was a survival horror that when you get to Aliens, Aliens becomes like an action roller coaster ride. Yeah, you still have the elements of the horror elements of the xenomorphs and the dangers and the tension.
It becomes bigger with each subsequent film.
Yes,
Yeah.
it becomes almost grander in scale. And then you look at Terminator. Terminator was actually very small scale at the very first. And you get to T2, it's more grander. It's more they took what they were trying to say in Terminator and expand on it in Terminator 2.
Both Alien and Terminator start off as exactly what you said, a horror film. Smaller, not as grand in scale. But with the sequels, they change direction and they go into borderline blockbuster film areas.
Yeah.
They're more high concept films rather than the smaller horror concepts. So you are right. But my thing with this is, even though M3GAN 2.0 was a good movie and I enjoyed it quite a bit, I'm not sure if fans themselves are really going to rally behind this, meaning that the fans, we all know horror fans. You are one of those fans, David.
Oh, absolutely.
You're not as narrow-minded as some fans are. Like they're not really wanting to see something incredibly different. They're more comfortable seeing things that they're familiar with, like most of us. But fandoms in general, I don't want to just say horror films, but fandoms in general, are very clear on what they want when they go into a movie. And I don't believe M3GAN 2.0 is going to satisfy those horror enthusiasts that helped catapult the first film.
Yeah.
M3GAN 2.0 has horror elements, but it definitely pulls back on those go-to horror tropes, and it substitutes those horror tropes for more sci-fi themes, science fiction cautionary tales. But there's a very clear difference between what horror does and science fiction. And at its core, that's what this movie does, is it poses questions more than what the first one did, because the first one wasn't about posing questions. It was about the horrific. It was about the danger. This is more about posing those philosophical questions. Who controls the ethical boundaries of AI development? What happens when innovation is driven not by care or accountability, but by military profit and geopolitical advantage? Can a machine created for empathy be used as a weapon? And what are the consequences when that machine is turned against its own design? The first movie didn't really pose that many questions.
Exactly. And that's what, like, when you bring up how with sequels like that, they take what the message was in the first one, and with the second one, they kind of wanted to broaden their horizons. And they wanted to actually fully develop a bigger sense of what the original message was. Because they by far, when you look at M3GAN 1 and M3GAN 2.0, they stuck to their message. The bones of the story is about the horrors of AI.
Yeah.
In the first one, it was very straight to the point. And they wanted to make sure, almost kind of like setting the table for the audience. Here's this philosophical meal that we've just prepared for you, and we're going to give you a full meal. Now, in the second one, it almost feels like, all right, now that we've given you your full meal, here's a couple little extra things that we wanted to say.
Yeah, because the film does, narratively speaking, deliver the expected genre thrills, and it does subtly interrogate our relationship to technology, particularly when power and intent fall into the wrong hands. With 2.0, M3GAN, it doesn't just escalate the violence, which thankfully I'm glad it didn't. I'm not a fan of, oh, did you like this violence in the first one? Well, we're going to double down on that violence.
Yeah.
So yes, they did double down on the violence, but that wasn't the intent. It was more about amplifying the moral stakes. And it is successful at doing this without losing its mainstream appeal, because there are monetary realities when producing films like this. Now, just to continue this particular topic here, this is not the same type of film as the first one. So while M3GAN 2.0, which is what you were just saying, is bigger, featuring more elaborate set pieces, heightened action, and a higher body count, it's also a more reflective film. And that is the biggest difference. Will that work with horror fans? Will that work with the expectations that many are going to be taking in with them to go see this new movie? Because this film attempts to dissect the psychological implications of artificial intelligence and the evolving relationships between humans and machines, rather than simply delivering, you know, techno horror thrills. And also it speaks more broadly to our dependence on technology and the complex effects of such technologies can have on children. That was another big talking point or thematic element, emotionally, developmentally, and socially as it pertains to children, which in doing so, in my opinion, David, the IP becomes more relevant and it fits more succinctly with the AI science fiction subgenre. Now, the biggest reason behind why this movie is probably different than the first is because this movie is trying to parallel what's happening in today's environment. The first movie fit fine with, in 2022, with the smart home, how everyone started to get the connected home. So the first one was speaking on that. Now we're in the throes of an AI revolution. That's not unless you've been living under a rock, you know this to be true. That's pretty much all the talking points right now, besides, you know, politics, which is never going to go away.
Which is never going to go away.
But AI is the thing that people are talking about. And the things that this movie tackles, M3GAN 2.0, are the relevant discussion points for AI currently. So in a lot of ways, the film might have sacrificed its integrity to the horror genre, but instead it swapped it out for more relevant themes. Why return to the well? I'm a fan of this type of stuff. Why return to the well? You've already done it in the first movie. If you're going to make a sequel, then make it unique, make it different. And in my opinion, that's exactly what the director and the producers did with this.
Because I think the problem, and I think you're right in, like, M3GAN 2.0 is going to be considered underrated as a film, because I think where it's being made right now, the audience right now is not geared for, I hate saying this, but it's not geared for creativity.
You're right.
You're right now, the audience is zeroed in on, give us something that's going to entertain us and be escapism for us. The quickest way to do that is to basically take, and this is, I personally like these films, but this is a clear example of like what films that are successful right now that are just basically you rinse, repeat, and continue the trend. The Fast and the Furious films.
No, come on.
I love the Fast and the Furious films, but you know, I'm going to be honest. You see one, you kind of seen them all.
Yeah. And there's a charming element to that. I'm being facetious, but I get your point.
But think about it. We're living in a time where the audience, I feel, gravitates more to movies like that.
Yeah.
Where they want, well,
familiarity,
and they want to, once they see a film, they want to continue on with that film.
Yeah. Well, David, maybe we're not giving horror fans enough credit. Maybe they will see this the same way they see movies like Terminator and Alien. And we forgot another one, Predator. Predator is very similar.
Yeah.
The first Predator film was definitely a horror.
Yes. And then you get to Predator 2.
And then it becomes something more of a sci-fi thriller with horrific elements, but I wouldn't categorize the later films as horror.
No,
and like we said, I think those are three perfect IPs to compare M3GAN 2.0 to: Alien, Terminator, and Predator. All three, including M3GAN now, started off as one thing and then broadened out. And I think that's the nature of of these types of movies, you have to, if you want to keep making movies, unfortunately, you have to get bigger.
You have to get bigger.
And the bigger you get, the less insular the film is. And when the film is too open, big, it removes the shadows. You're shining light on the shadows. You're removing the fear. You're removing the horrific. It's hard to make a horror film big, if that makes sense. Name me one horror film that was very, very big and it was still scary as fuck. There really isn't. I'm not saying there
really
isn't one, but at the top of our heads, the fact that we can't just point to one goes to show you that that's just the nature of film. Halloween always stayed small.
Yes. Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, same thing.
Yeah, so you can point to those film franchises, those horror film franchises that have maintained the horror, and what do they have in common? They've all maintained a relatively small world.
Yes,
working with a small budget.
Mm-hmm. And that is one of the drawbacks with the horror film industry in its total, is like, once you hook on to something, it is really difficult to change something just on a fly. You get those special moments like Aliens and Terminator, but those are because those cross over just not into horror, but also sci-fi. You're dealing with another genre that can probably take that type of tonal change.
Yeah.
A really great example of a movie franchise currently right now that just epitomizes that idea that every single film has to be the same, and the horror film fans love it to death, and I particularly love it, is Terrifier. Terrifier is just basically the same movie back to back, and it's all based on shock horror.
Yeah, I don't think there's a skill involved in making movies like that. I can't enjoy.
You do it
films like
once, cool. But now they're up to 4, Mike.
Yeah, I admire their ability to turn a buck on shit. To make a buck on a shit idea that really isn't good. Splatter porn is not my thing. I know some people call Saw splatter porn. I would disagree. Saw, specifically the first 4 films,
that's another franchise,
are highly meditative.
Yeah, that's another franchise too, if you think about it. That Saw,
it maintained its horror though.
It maintained the horror, but
it got so big it got out of hand.
Exactly. As soon as you got to, I think, Saw
6.
Saw 5
Whenever
or Saw
they
6.
dug a tape recorder out of Jigsaw's belly, you knew the jig was up.
Yeah. It was kind of like, how did he put it in there?
Although I will say, if you just play the Saw theme song to anything, it makes it that much better, though.
Yes.
So,
yes, it does.
That's the only thing M3GAN is missing so far. We need a catchy theme song. It has the catchy pop culture flair to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that this movie has going for it. It attaches itself to the zeitgeist, culturally speaking. Like it plays within pop culture very well.
Yeah, my fear for that though is like you had the first film and you developed a really great horror character in the character of M3GAN.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be honest, in number 2,
please be honest, David. Please,
because I know that there are some of my friends who are big fans that listen to us of the M3GAN franchise right now.
Oh, okay.
And they love the character of M3GAN.
Yeah,
but
I do too.
My problem is particularly with this M3GAN 2.0. They came close to taking the teeth out of her because like she's not the villain.
Well, no spoilers, David.
Yeah,
no spoilers.
But the character of M3GAN, she's not as big of a threat as she is in number 1.
I think she's a force to reckon with, much like Arnold's Terminator. Terminator,
yes,
you would say in the second T2 Judgment Day, the fangs were taken out of him as well.
Yeah, and it was weird because like I really was thinking about this film all night, and when my wife brought this up about like what I was talking to her because I was talking my notes to her, she brought up Terminator, and I was like going, oh my God, if you watch Megan and then Megan 2.0, you kind of seen the tonal similarities between
There is, yeah.
Terminator and Terminator 2, where it's like,
in terms of characterization of Megan,
I'm not gonna.
is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
I'm not gonna give any spoilers, Mike. But you cannot tell me that you didn't see similarities of Megan by the end of the movie, and suddenly think of Arnold, the character, the Terminator, in the end of the second movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, yeah, they kind of actually did what we've been saying since the beginning of the show. Is kind of like they were trying to do something that was old school.
I would argue, though, because you are right. I would argue, though, that this turn is better than the Terminator turn, because the Terminator turn was just, hey, we reprogrammed
him.
Whereas here you have the idea of experience.
Yes.
And that, to me, changing and switching gears a bit here, David, to me, that's the film's biggest strength, was the notion that experience leads to sentience or even consciousness. The idea that the ability to engage with the world through tactile stimuli or some form of physicality initiates true consciousness is both philosophically rich and thematically resonant. That, for me, was the strength. And that is the reason why, Dave, I will say this now, even though I believe the first Megan film is a better film, I actually like the second one better because it was delving into philosophical territory. It was trying to explain and dissect how a machine can possibly become a real life form. In fact, there is a scene, this isn't a spoiler, where Megan states that without a body, there is no mind, suggesting that it is the fusion of mind and body that sparks life. This moment gestures toward an embodied theory of consciousness, which is some stuff we've talked about on other podcasts. I won't get into the weeds here and bore people with these types of philosophical notions.
Yes.
But it's the idea where cognition is not just a matter of code or computation, but something that emerges through like material interaction with the world. And if you read AI theory from philosophers, this is aligned with many of their theories on how the singularity will happen. And the singularity is that moment when a machine becomes alive. And I found this compelling because it aligns with several views that philosophers hold, as I was saying. For example, there's a gentleman named Rupert Sheldrake. I've read numerous books of his, and he's both a philosopher and a scientist, and he's argued that analog systems, with their continuous physical and wave-like nature, may be more conducive to the emergence of sentience than digital systems, which rely on binary code and symbolic abstraction. Simulation. It's simulating. Digital simulating. Analog is not simulating. There's physicality. There's interaction. So from this perspective, AI built purely on digital architecture might never cross a threshold into true consciousness because it lacks the organic resonant materiality that analog systems and, by extension, biological systems possess. And Megan 2.0 indirectly engages this philosophical divide where it raises the question of whether true intelligence or experience can emerge from simulation alone, or if it requires something more elemental, more embodied, something closer to life itself. And that really is, David, the strength of the movie.
And in doing so, it took the concept of the first film where, if you really look at the first Megan film, it was saying a very deep message of what it means to be human on a machine scale, right? And that is what I was really fascinated with Megan 2.0 is like, instead of just veering away from that message, they decided to actually double down on the message and actually go deeper and bring up the fact that the character of Megan herself needs that tactile experience to understand what it means. Why is it that she is connected to Katie?
Right.
Because like the thing is, yeah, she's programmed to protect Katie, but at the end of the day, why is that important? And in doing so, it creates like this really cool philosophical moments between Katie and M3GAN, where it's like, yeah, you need there is something tactile about having a relationship with an AI.
Yeah.
Where it's actually learning from you.
And that right there is one of the strong points of the film as well. Is it did, despite this being a very different movie, they did retain the core foundations, the familial foundations that made that movie emotionally resonant.
Oh yeah.
The relationship between Katie and her aunt,
Gemma.
Katie and Gemma, and then now, and of course Katie and M3GAN, and now kind of building on that, they create this relationship between Gemma, Katie, and M3GAN.
Yeah, Gemma, the worst parent ever. Worst parent ever.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about, like, they took the bones that they set in the first film with all the characters.
Yeah.
And they kept it the same, but they basically pushed their own little story narratives, their growth, just a little bit further. Like,
yeah, so they didn't neglect
they
what
didn't
they
neglect
started.
what they started.
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate the fact that, yeah, Gemma, by the end of the first film, you know, you could have almost seen them turn Gemma into kind of like this, you know, standalone heroic character right away, kind of like Ripley from Aliens. Instead, they basically continue the fact that, oh, no.
Well, they kind of did that in this movie, but
well, they kind of did, but, you know, it needed a little boost from M3GAN.
but it made sense.
But it made sense.
Yeah.
And, like, but here, they still focused on the fact that, no. Gemma is still a human being that has these flaws. The flaws don't leave her.
Yeah, because the message is also about parenting.
Exactly.
That's part of what I liked about the movie. You know, how parents are in uncharted territory. I mean, first off, parenting is always uncharted territory, but even more so, I think a lot of us are in the same boat with technology. If you have a kid, how much technology is too much for a child?
Especially nowadays.
Yeah, should you limit it, or is this all like a moral panic? Or is there reason and a justifiable reason as to why we should limit technology for children? So, Dave, while the film is a relatively simple popcorn thriller, it does have an intellectual bent to it.
Yeah.
And I don't see how this IP could ever run out of steam, because it's so closely, as I was saying a few moments ago, because it so closely parallels modern society. As real-world AI continues to evolve, these films can be developed in tandem with those advancements. Anytime something new enters the cultural zeitgeist regarding AI, the writers can simply comment on those developments in each subsequent installment, whether or not those films actually come to fruition. But it kind of writes itself. All you have to do is follow the technological trends, and you have your next movie.
Yeah, especially since, even though it seems like right now, without getting any spoilers, the villain that they introduced in M3GAN 2.0 was a MacGuffin, they can still use that villain, especially if they use elements that's basically out there right now in technology.
Yeah.
Because, you know, just because you get rid of the villain doesn't mean the villain's really gone.
Yeah, I hope the villain in this movie isn't gone, because just to be a complete douchebag for a minute, she is she is mighty attractive.
I will tell you this, I was so excited to see that actress again.
Yeah, and if you guys are wondering who she is Shin Hattie, I believe, from Ahsoka.
From Ahsoka.
She's the Dark Jedi.
She's the one shining beacon of the series.
Yeah. Dude, my kid liked the M3GAN movie, so I'm like, we're gonna go see M3GAN 2.0. Guess what? The blonde woman from Ahsoka is in it. He's like, yeah, I know. I'm like, how do you know this? I'm like, how do you, that means he's searching for it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, she's attractive. I'm like, no, no, she's not.
Are you gonna actually cut some technology out of your?
Yes, I'm gonna take a playbook from M3GAN 2.0 and
from Gemma and just basically maybe teach him Steven Seagal films.
see, that's another part about this movie that we haven't talked about yet, Dave. It's incredibly funny.
It is.
There are real laugh out loud moments. I mean, not to justify the asshole that was sitting, 3 rows behind us. That was, I think he was all like, it was performative. I can't stand people like that, Dave.
Well,
I guess we're going to digress a bit, but I don't mind people's reactions. I go to see movies with people because of the experience and hearing. I like to know what people are going to clap at, what they're going to, get excited about, what they're going to ooh and ah about. But if you are the loudest motherfucker in that theater and your laugh and your noise cuts through and distracts, you're performing.
Yes. And here was the thing. It'd be one
Fucking
thing.
hate that shit.
It would be one thing if he was doing it at points that made sense. If he was laughing at some of the jokes,
if he was laughing with us, we wouldn't hear him. He has to laugh at the things that no one else is laughing at.
He only reacted to like random things.
Narcissism is a real thing in today's society, dude. It's like, how can I make this about me?
And that was the thing. It was like, that's why I mentioned to you coming into the studio when I was like going, you know what? I kind of enjoyed pandemic movie going when it was just me. It was just me in the theater, maybe a few people, and I just had to deal with myself. And it's one of the reasons why I'm like, I am pro AI, because like, hey, I can handle dealing with AI. I don't want to deal with people.
So, David, you bring up a very interesting point here. I know you were indirectly bringing this up, but the COVID.
Yeah.
The COVID. That's what I call it now. The COVID.
The COVID.
So M3GAN, the first film, grossed $95 million domestically, and then worldwide $181 million. And I believe the budget was like $12 million.
Yes, it was tiny.
It just insane amount of money. Now, yes, the movie was good. It was entertaining. It has, I believe, a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, but that doesn't always equate box office success.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, this movie benefited from the very
trapped.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Trapped.
Lack of film releases during COVID. There wasn't a lot of movies going to the theaters. The big studios were dropping things on their streaming platforms instead of taking a chance and paying all these costs on P&L and or P&A with prints and advertisement.
Yes,
which is still a thing. So why run the risk when you're in the midst of COVID? And even in 2022, COVID was starting to die out, but they still had the mentality. People were still living in that idea of, let's not be around people. I don't know if I want to go to the theater. People weren't willing to go back yet. It wasn't until Top Gun Maverick came out that started the new era of everyone going back to the movie theaters, right?
Yeah.
So this film might be in some dangerous waters, economically speaking, in terms of box office, because this movie is now being released in the dead heat of summer season. And this is the first summer season in a very long time where there are a lot of choices.
Well, that's the thing. That was something that basically me and you have discussed in a lot of our past shows, especially with Thomas, where it was kind of like, this year is going to be very interesting to watch industry-wise, because we have so many very beloved horror franchises coming out with sequels, and everyone's just galvanized behind them and basically we are going to support them.
But not just the summer movies. You have F1, you have 28
F1.
Years Later, you have Jurassic World,
Yes.
Superman, Fantastic Four. There are a lot of movies that are getting ready to come out, so that might end up hurting M3GAN's box office performance.
Oh, yeah.
Now, according to the AP News, the sequel's budget has been tripled compared to its predecessor.
You can tell.
Yes, it's much bigger, but even though it's much bigger, I'd still say they played conservatively with the budget, because that if they tripled the budget, that would mean $36 million. And that's still relatively low.
Yeah.
So I don't think it'll have a problem hitting that number, because there's a lot of people anticipating this film, but I think the problem will be in its longevity. If
Yes.
it doesn't earn a lot in that opening weekend, it may not have the staying power to earn back the 2.5, what did it say, 2.5?
I think it's
2 to 3 is what they're saying. 2 to 3 times
what
what the
it
budget
made.
was, what they need to make. So that would mean what? 40, 80, 120 million just to break even.
yes. And that's a lot to ask.
Jesus, when I say it like that, that is a lot, because worldwide, the last film made 181.
Yeah, and that's a lot to ask for a film in that genre. And think about it, Mike. We have so many films that I'm really psyched to actually see that started small scale, and nowadays the industry is expecting them to break the bank.
Yeah.
You have M3GAN, you have 28 Days Later, or actually, sorry, 28 Years
Yeah,
now
David, get it
later.
right, Dave.
And then you have Black Phone coming out later this year that everyone's freaking talking about.
Yeah.
And you have like all these smaller movies that succeeded in the pandemic, and you have the, overlords of the film industry looking down at them going, "Oh, you did well during then. Here, now it's your turn to play with the big boys."
Yeah. Do you think it's going to earn at least its budget? Well, its budget's 36. Do you think it's going to at least get that?
I think it'll get that.
Yeah.
But I do not think, and I want to preface this by saying I really enjoyed M3GAN 2.0.
Yeah.
I liked it. However, I can see a lot of like its fan base getting turned away from how different it is. And basically, you won't see that strong push of fans trying to make the film work. And that's the thing that I'm worried about. Do I think that it'll make its budget back? Yes. Usually it's a shocker if like a film like this does not make its money back, especially since it's so small in scale, like budget wise. Will it make quadruple or triple its money back? That's tough, because I just don't see, just what we mentioned earlier, horror films do not do that.
Yeah. So the projected opening from numerous sites are saying between, basically the average is 25 to 30 million is what numerous sites are projecting for the opening weekend. Now that's domestic, of course, as well. So you would think, let's include the international audience, which these types of films perform better. Action films, bigger films perform better in international markets due to cultural differences in language. That's why action films always do better than our regular smaller films, because you don't need to understand a lot of things in terms of American culture to appreciate like a high-paced, kinetic action, balls to the wall type of film. So this movie does have that going for it. It is bigger. It's more of an action film than the first one. So it could theoretically make about, excuse me, I think opening weekend about 90 million to 100 is what I think it'll make. And that's, of course, worldwide.
Worldwide?
Yeah.
I'll agree with that. 90 to 100 million worldwide, yes. If you were going to tell me 90 to 100 million stateside, no.
I don't think it can do that because
it.
it's being released the same time as Brad Pitt's
F1
first major film in many years, and is directed by the gentleman that his last film was Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
and that is being used in almost every marketing ad for F1. The director that did Top Gun Maverick. So that movie's tracking to make a big splash. So M3GAN has some competition, whereas in 2022, because of COVID,
There was no competition.
there
for it.
wasn't a lot of competition. So we'll see ultimately. Before we close out, Dave, I do want to mention the visual effects. You have to give credit where credit's due. I absolutely love the visual effects. They did lean a little heavier into CGI, which of course that's the nature of a bigger film and you're moving into
Bigger budget.
action. But they still maintained the animatronics that they utilized in the first film, which was crafted by, I believe it's Morat FX. And it had the intricate mechanisms for the eye, the mouth, the facial movement, which was all controlled by a crew on set. So they still maintained that. They also used the silicone mask and the bodysuit. So they still relied heavily on practical effects. And I feel like that always needs to be expressed in reviews when we're talking about these types of movies, because visual effects, as we know, in this day and age, is getting worse.
It is.
It's getting worse. This has become a bit of a joke on the internet now. I thought it was just us that were seeing this, but obviously it's not just us, because there's now memes all over the place saying, what happened to CGI? And they'll show a movie from like 2003 where the CGI is beautiful. And then they show something from like last week and it looks bad. It looks muddy and murky. There's no clarity. It's just messy looking.
Yes.
This film does have some of those modern CGI-isms, that murky, muddy flare look, but it does predominantly rely on the practical, which I'm incredibly thankful for, because that was a lost art, I'd say, about 7 years ago. But what was it, David? About 7-8 years ago is when people started to return to that a bit.
Yeah.
I think it happened right when Force Awakens came out, when JJ said, he's going to do all practical effects. And I think that's what started that trend again.
Well, yeah, because like, especially
I could be wrong, but it was around that time period, I believe. 2016, 2015.
2015, I think.
Yeah.
But like, particularly when audiences see M3GAN 2.0, the scenes that really do stick out to me are the practical effects, particularly with M3GAN herself.
It's remarkable, dude.
It's insane what they do with that character.
Yeah.
I mean, she has multiple forms in this film, and a lot of them are done in practical effects. And it just boggles my mind that basically no one's really discussed or talked about how far practical effect technology nowadays has come, because it's slowly catching up. It's
slowly catching up,
because you always have CGI constantly trying to break the mold and kind of push the barriers ahead of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because number one, it's cheaper, quicker. And
I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore.
The problem is it's easy for people to get lazy with it.
There you go. Yeah.
Practical though, I mean, I have seen some films this past 2 years, Mike, where you can tell that basically the technology for practical effects has excelled, amazingly.
Well, they have, if they want people to take their movies seriously, and this is where Hollywood, maybe not the executives, but the creatives themselves, they tend to try to listen, because they know if they continue to do things that people don't like, meaning, of course, there's a lot of problems still with movies, but they do try. They're very slow at catching up, but the call for better visual effects is being heard.
Yeah.
And I know these people because I listen to several CGI VFX podcasts from a couple of guys from Hollywood that works, like that's their day job. That's what they do. And they've talked about these things, that they prefer CGI. They enjoy, and I understand that, because if you're the artist and that's your pen, that's what you prefer. That's what you're doing. And they always say good things about CGI, but they also understand that the audiences are not really, like, they're not adjusting to the new CGI. The fact that we're calling for older things, please use older technology. That says something. but they are listening, and people more or less are now starting to create hybrid visual effects again. And rather than just relying on one tool in the toolbox, and this is something we say very commonly on our shows, you have a toolbox with numerous tools at your disposal. Use them. Don't just use one. Don't just, if you need to screw something in, do you use a hammer? No, use a screwdriver.
Exactly.
At least I hope you do.
Well, you would hope, Mike, but remember, we're talking about humans here. They're very simple.
That's true. It's in the computer.
I press enter.
There's a little Zoolander reference for people as old as me.
Dude,
although I will say there were some references in M3GAN 2.0.
Oh, dude, yes.
That were so fucking dated. I'm like, is anyone going to get this but us?
But us.
And the people that laughed, I looked around, they're old people.
They're old people. Yes. And that's the thing that cracks me up the most is like,
I mean, the Steven Seagal jokes were fucking awesome, but who's going to get them? No one's going to get those jokes. That's why when the woman at the end was trying to quote those movies, like the titles of those movies.
Oh, yeah, dude, it was
there was
funny.
A moment in the movie. This is a spoiler, so just everyone tune out for a second. I'll be done in about 30 seconds.
Because it's so good.
There's a moment in the movie where Gemma is trying to convey something secretly to Katie, to her daughter. And in order to get her to do it, she starts saying random Steven Seagal movie titles.
Yes.
And the theater was crickets, except for like maybe a handful of old people who weren't laughing because we got it immediately. And I think that might have been part of the humor, though. I think it was designed to show that Gemma is old, and she's trying to, be hip or whatever with her daughter, and her daughter didn't even get the joke.
Exactly. And that's what I loved about it, is kind of like, you can tell that M3GAN is really M3GAN 2.0 is really trying to tap into something that is more broader than what M3GAN 1 did.
Yes.
And
it's trying to put gas in the tank.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
That if you understand movie strategy and you know what you're watching, that's what this director and this team was trying to do. I don't think their goal was to please the original horror fans. I think their goal was say, hey, I'm going to please the majority of the audience that enjoyed this movie, and we're going to put more gas in this tank. And the only way we can do that is making this movie a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just to close out, David, I will say that the first movie is a better movie.
Oh, yeah.
And this makes sound like a paradox here. The first movie is a better film. But the second movie is a smarter film. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
It's a smarter film, and it's a far more entertaining film, I think, for the mainstream.
Yes. And that's the thing that I think is like, it's going to be interesting for me to watch how the fan base reacts to M3GAN 2.0, because like, you're asking this film franchise now to kind of leave the nest. You're going to be jumping out of that nest and taking flight.
Yeah.
If you want M3GAN to actually become a franchise, a viable franchise, which me, you, and Thomas have been saying, we need new franchises out there.
Yeah.
We need them. We can't rely on the old. We have to get some new IPs out there. M3GAN can do it.
Yeah. And I do believe, David, as we had said at the top of the show, that this director, as well as the producers, are following the Alien, Terminator, and Predator playbook. The first movie is truly a horror, and the second one starts to expand the world and be something kind of different, but still adhere to the core foundation.
Yeah. I'm really interested to see where Gerald Johnstone goes next, especially with Blumhouse, because depending on what Gerald Johnstone does, he's one of those filmmakers that I'm really wanting to pay attention to, because he could really do some interesting work for the future.
He did a good job directing, David, but with these types of movies, it's always hard for me, and this is something we also talk about a lot lately. I think authorship might be contested, or could be contested, because you also have James Wan producing, James Blum,
Blum.
or Jason Blum.
Jason Blum.
You also have numerous writers on this movie as well. So is it Gerard Johnstone or is it the producers?
That's a good point.
So I do like that they had the same director come back, which does say a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We'll see. It's really hard for me to say that right now. If you're looking at Rotten Tomatoes, it's very early. The first movie was, I believe, still sitting at a 93%.
Yeah.
And this one is, I believe, as of this morning, was sitting at a 63%.
Which is insanity.
That is insanity. That is a huge chasm there that doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
I would say if horror fans, this is what I believe. I believe that people went in with expectations, the horror fans.
Yeah, I was one of them.
And they're like, well, you know what? This isn't really what the first one was. And me, I like that. As long as you don't throw out the soul of your franchise, I want a different movie. I don't want to see the same movie. I already saw it. If I want to see it again, I will push play at home.
Yeah, tell me something different.
Yeah. What else do you have?
Exactly.
What else do you have for me? So I would probably put this movie at about a 78, 79%.
I'm very close to your score. I actually came up with a 80 to a 82. I think I'm
an 82 to an 82.
Or 80 to an 82.
Oh.
But like talking it out with you, I'm more willing to sit on an 82 because I did really enjoy this film.
Yeah.
It was a fun watch. Is it something that basically would I buy this film without the first film? No. I could buy M3GAN 1 without M3GAN 2.0. Would I buy
That's an incomplete set though, Dave. Come on. That's killing me, man. I'm OCD. You can't do
You're
that.
OCD.
What's wrong with you?
But like honestly, if I was OCD like you, I would actually still collect this set.
Yeah. Yeah, I would buy them. Why not? I like the artificial intelligence subgenre of science fiction. I think it's smart. They're either smart or they're really bad.
Or they're really dumb.
Yeah, like, okay, for example, I recently watched the Subservient. That's the name of the movie with Megan Fox.
We know why you watched it.
Well, yes, I was being a doucher on one night, and I was like, you know what? I was smoking some weed. I'm like, you know what? I want to see some Megan Fox. 15 minutes into the movie, I was like, I didn't care about Megan Fox. Well, I did, but also I'm like, this movie's really good.
It is, and it's a similar story in that the similar genre as M3GAN.
It tackles AI, but not just like in a high concept, like Asimov type of way, but it tackles it more in relation to what's happening in today's environment. In fact, it's dealing directly. That movie was dealing directly with automation and the loss of work that happens with the advent of automation and AI, which is a fear that's driving a lot of people right now.
Yeah.
So
it's basically zeroing in on like the example you gave with Asimov is very grand in scale because like a lot of the technology back then with Asimov was just it was hard to believe.
Yeah.
Now that the technology is right in front of us and it's here.
Right.
Movies like this and M3GAN are now having to tell stories that are have more substance behind it. You can't just tell us grandiose things about AI. It's right here. You got to give us something more substantial.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.